Final results from Cote d'Ivoire show ruling party wins nearly 3/4 of seats in the parliamentary elections held on Saturday. United Nations Security Council members condemn Israel's recognition of Somaliland. Thus, United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres urges world leaders to choose peace over war in his New Year message. Hello and welcome to the program today. I'm Layo Olarinde. We begin in Cote d'Ivoire, where the ruling party appears to have strengthened its hold on power, winning nearly 3/4 of seats in parliamentary elections held on Saturday. According to final results announced by the Independent Electoral Commission, the ruling party RHDP secured 197 of the 255 seats, around 77%, expanding its majority just 2 months after President Alassane Ouattara was re-elected for a controversial fourth term. Voter turnout remained low at about 35%, continuing a trend of declining participation. Now, with this result, President Ouattara now controls most key institutions, reinforcing stability, according to supporters, but raising concerns among critics over shrinking political space and weakened democratic checks. More reactions continue to trail Israel's recognition of Somaliland as an independent nation. Most UN Security Council members have slammed Israel's move at a meeting that was convened in response to the decision on Monday, which several countries said may also have serious implications for Palestinians in Gaza. The United States was the only member of the 15-member body not to condemn Israel's formal recognition of the breakaway region of Somalia at the emergency meeting in New York, although it said its own position on Somaliland had not changed. Addressing the UNSC, Somalia's UN ambassador Abubakar Dir Osman implored members to firmly reject Israel's act of aggression, which he said not only threatened to fragment Somalia, but also to destabilize the wider Horn of Africa and the Red Sea regions. The emergency meeting was called after Israel last week became the first and only country to recognize the self-declared Republic of Somaliland as an independent and sovereign state.
Israel's announcement prompted widespread reactions from the region and beyond, including from Egypt, Jordan, Djibouti, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, among others, as well as a joint statement by 20 Middle Eastern and African countries rejecting and condemning Israel's recognition of Somaliland. In closing, Mr. President, I would like to recall, as has the Secretary General, that the Security Council has repeatedly affirmed the respect for the sovereignty, territorial integrity, political independence, and unity of Somalia, as most recently reaffirmed in Resolution 2809 of 23 December 2025. I also call on Somali stakeholders to engage in peaceful and constructive dialogue, in particular recalling the 2023 Djibouti communique on talks between the federal government of Somalia and Somaliland.
This action represents a direct violation of the UN Charter, the African Union's fundamental principles, and a breach of cornerstone of the international law. Respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the states. This act of aggression is aimed at encouraging fragmentation of the territory of Somalia, which is the northwestern region, is an integral part and is destabilizing the Horn of Africa, entire Horn of Africa, and the Red Sea region. Taking note of the statements made by some officials regarding the forced involuntary relocation of Palestinians from their homeland to other countries, A3+ unequivocally reject any steps aimed at advancing this objective, including any attempt by Israel to relocate the Palestinian population from Gaza to northwestern region of Somalia.
Earlier this year, several countries, including members of this council, made the unilateral decision to recognize a non-existent Palestinian state, and yet no emergency meeting was called to express this council's outrage. This council's persistent double standards and misdirection of focus distract from its mission of maintaining international peace and security. On the matter of Somaliland, we have no announcement to make regarding U.S. recognition of Somaliland, and there has been no change in American policy.
Mr. President, the question raised by Israel's recognition of Somaliland is not whether international law permits acknowledgement of long-established facts. It does. The question is whether this Council is ready to engage with reality as it exists. Somaliland's historical sovereignty, more than 3 decades of effective self-governance, and demonstrated capacity to act as a responsible international partner meet the legal criteria that guide recognition. Israel has aligned its foreign policy with this reality.
To come to this place and lecture us humanity and genocide and human rights and independence and democracy, and we know what you're doing on a daily basis, is just an insult.
Well, let's discuss this further. Joining us now is Agbeye Oburumu, African Affairs Analyst and African Liberty Writing Fellow from Port Harcourt, Rivers State here in Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us on Network Africa.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Well, Israel has become the first country in the world to formally recognize Somaliland as an independent state. This is a region that has never previously had international recognition since it declared autonomy from Somalia in 1991. How significant is this break with international and African diplomatic norms, and particularly the meaning of this for African sovereignty and regional stability?
I think it puts a question to the sovereignty of Africa as a continent. Its member states, I'm talking the African Union especially, it puts a very big question mark to it. If we look at the United Nations Charter, Article 2, subsection 4, we would see that the United Nations proscribes the act of countries involving themselves in matters that affects countries, especially when it concerns their territorial integrity. And this is a case that we see here in Somalia, and the northeastern part of the northwestern part of Somalia being recognized by Israel as Somaliland. It was a de facto state trying to gain some sort of recognition prior. But what Israel is doing, or what Israel has done, is an attempt to make it a de jure state. And this puts a very big question mark on how Africa is seen globally and how we have these meddlesome experiences from countries outside this climate.
Well, Israel says the recognition is part of strengthening ties and cooperation, even linking Somaliland to the Abraham Accords. We heard that from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. But Somalia's president has denounced the move. Somalia has denounced the move as an affront on its territorial integrity. In your view, what are Israel's strategic motives, in recognizing Somaliland?
Okay, I think Israel's motive is not far-fetched. Of course, the geolocation of Somaliland, as it were, is very strategic. It's at the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. Of course, we see a situation where Israel is looking at how she can come into Africa using Somaliland as the first point of call. And the maritime space that Somaliland has access to, of course, it is to a very large extent the choke point of maritime activities linking the Red Sea to the Indian Ocean and, of course, connecting it to Europe and all of that. So it's an opportunity for Israel to take advantage of that, and also some sort of competition between Israel and other countries like Turkey. Turkey is almost the political patron of Somalia as it were today. So Israel is looking at a situation where she can come and plant her feet in Africa also, some sort of competition. Of course, we also have the military, having a military base there, and it's making the rounds that Israel may also be interested in relocating some of the displaced Palestinians in Gaza to Somaliland. So I feel the interest of Israel is not far-fetched. It's seemingly glaring.
And you touched on, the maritime implication of this. How might this, reshape geopolitical competition in that particular region, that's the Horn of Africa?
It's going to have its implications because we've heard from groups like the Al-Shabaab stating that they would not. So now the Al-Shabaab is taking some sort of nationalistic perspective or viewpoint to the recognition of Somaliland by Israel, and they are saying that they will not let it fly, they will not let it happen. So the competition, especially, I think few weeks ago, we also saw Israel have some sort of unilateral agreement with Greece and Cyprus. So all this is in a bid to see how she could demystify Turkey and other countries in Europe and the Middle East that are seemingly in sync with or in cahoots with Turkey. And we've seen this brewing over a period of time. So we just hope that, and I pretty much just hope that it doesn't spiral into some sort of a cataclysmic event, having these powers, these powerful countries coming to the shores of Africa to have a very serious clash.
All right, then, Agbeye Oburumu, African Affairs Analyst and African Liberty Writing Fellow. Thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, insecurity was one of Nigeria's most pressing challenges in the year 2025, with many lives lost, many displaced, food production undermined, and ethnic divisions widened. Despite government efforts, Nigeria's sovereignty was threatened in very significant ways, home and abroad. We will now turn our attention to the security sector of the country to examine how the country fared in the year and experts' assessment of the situation. Our correspondent, Emperor Simon, reports.
From clashes over land and grazing rights in Benue State and coordinated ethnic militia attacks in Plateau State, to resurgence of insurgency in northeast and banditry attacks in northwest, as well as parts of north central, insecurity threatened the very fiber of Nigeria's existence in 2025. The Global Terrorism Index ranked Nigeria 6th worldwide in 2025, up from 8th in the previous year. Behind the statistics are human stories, lives lost, families displaced, and communities living in fear.
If you look at the West African security tracker, it's indicated that there are over 5,000 incidents in Nigeria, which amounts to about 12,900 deaths all over Africa, West Africa, and of these 12,900 deaths in West Africa, Nigeria accounts for 45% of this death. In
the face of the attacks, President Bola Tinubu reshuffled the service chiefs, replacing the then Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa, with the then Chief of Army Staff, General Olufemi Oluyede. The President appointed new Chief of Army Staff, Chief of Air Staff, and Chief of Naval Staff. He also declared a nationwide security emergency and ordered the Inspector General of Police to immediately withdraw police personnel attached to very important personalities. also following a wave of attacks in November, including an attack on church worshippers in Eruku in Ekiti local government area of Kwara State and mass school abduction in Magatown in Kebbi State, as well as in Papiri in Niger State. The Minister of Defense, Mr. Badaru, also resigned his position. He was immediately replaced by General Christopher Musa. As Nigeria grappled with the issues, the United States government under President Donald Trump designated Nigeria a country of particular concern, accusing the government of complicit over an alleged genocide against Christians, which sparked debate both in the country and outside the country on the veracity of the claims. Mr. Trump threatened to also deploy U.S. troops to Nigeria. On Christmas Day, Mr. Trump announced that U.S. military carried out bombardments on terrorist enclaves in Nigeria. The federal government later confirmed President Donald Trump's announcement, saying it was a joint operation. The announcement came barely a day after a mosque in Gambaru Market in Maiduguri in Borno State was attacked by suicide bombers.
It's all security measures. Anything you can put in place to prevent the loss of lives and property, put them in place. If it's going to take the international community to ensure the protection of lives of the Nigerian people, put it in place.
Nigeria needs to be very careful to ensure that there is fairness, there is equity, and there is balance in terms of how these operations are carried out. It should never be seen to be against a particular faith or a particular ethnic group. If that happens, then it will create more problems.
Despite the setbacks, security forces recorded gains. Approximately 3,000 bandits and terrorists were neutralized. At least 1,000 kidnapped victims were rescued. The Force Public Relations Officer, CSP Benjamin Hundayin, also highlighted major achievements recorded by the Nigeria Police in the year.
Total of suspects arrested for the year, 5,721. And in terms of recoveries for firearms, we recovered a total of 1,766 firearms. And for ammunition, we recovered a total of 13,487 ammunition. Do not forget, this is across the country from January till date.
In terms of investments in security, the Tinubu administration in 2025 allocated over 6 trillion naira to security and defense, with over 4 trillion naira for personnel costs and over 1 trillion naira for capital expenditure on hardware. But analysts say funding must reach operational overheads and intelligence fusion to translate into safer communities.
For me, I will advise that the Nigerian government should carry out this war as an intelligence-driven war, because if we don't, bring in intelligence, I will not be able to succeed. And 2026, I will strongly advise that the Nigerian political elite should stop the use of talks.
Nigerians should expect a sustained fight, sustained onslaughts on criminals, on terrorists, on bandits, sustained.
As 2025 closes, Nigeria's security remains fragile, but experts believe if the federal government prioritizes community-based security partnerships in the coming year, strengthen intelligence sharing across agencies, and invest in conflict prevention mechanisms that address root causes, coupled with reforms that build trust between citizens and security forces, Nigeria can begin to turn the tide towards lasting stability. Emperor Simon, Channels Television News.
Well, 2025 has been tagged as one of the most busy election years across Africa. From the western region to the eastern region, voters went to the polls in several countries, while in others, elections exposed deeper questions about democracy, power and political transition. In all, one key element out was not just who won, but how power was retained, reshaped or legitimized, often by incumbents, former military rulers or dominant parties. Well, here's a look at the major presidential elections that took place in Africa in 2025 and the political dynamics.
Gabon's election in April was one of the most closely watched in Africa. Former General Brice Oligui Nguema, who led the 2023 coup that ended the Bongo family's decades-long rule, won the presidential election with a high majority. The vote formally ended the transition period and returned the country to civilian rule. Malawi's September election stood out for a different reason. Lazarus Chakwera faced a tough race centered on economic hardship, inflation, and public frustration. Voters turned out in large numbers, and the contest was widely seen as open and unpredictable. The election reinforced Malawi's reputation as one of Southern Africa's more competitive democracies, where incumbents can lose and institutions still matter. At 92 years old, Paul Biya once again secured another term in October, extending one of the world's longest presidencies. The election took place amid low voter enthusiasm, opposition complaints, and concerns over succession. Mr. Biya's victory reinforced a familiar pattern in Cameroon: elections that changed little at the top, while deeper questions about leadership renewal remain unanswered. President Alassane Ouattara won a fourth term in October with a large margin after several key opposition figures were barred from running. Authorities defended the process as constitutional, while critics said the exclusions weakened political competition. The election avoided the violence seen in previous cycles, but debates over fairness and inclusivity continue to shape Ivorian politics. Tanzania's October general election delivered a massive win for President Samia Suluhu Hassan. The scale of a victory was striking, but it came against the backdrop of opposition restrictions and allegations of harassment. While the government highlighted stability and economic progress, critics questioned whether the political playing field was truly open. In December, Guinea held its first presidential election since the 2021 coup. Junta leader Mamadi Doumbouya was widely expected to win, positioning the election as a transition back to civilian rule. Also in December, voters in the Central African Republic went to the polls after constitutional changes allowed President Faustin Archange Touadera to seek another term. The election took place amid security concerns and heavy international scrutiny, reflecting how legal reforms can reshape term limits without necessarily reshaping power. The presidential elections of this year underscore a persistent tension in African politics between formal democratic processes and the concentration of power. While ballots were cast across the continent, the outcome suggests that holding an election does not automatically translate into meaningful political change.
As the year comes to an end, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has issued a stark warning to global leaders, saying the world is standing at a critical crossroad marked by conflict, division, and climate breakdown. In his New Year's message, Mr. Guterres said chaos and uncertainty continue to dominate the global landscape, alongside what he describes as systemic violations of international law and a retreat from shared human values. The UN chief highlighted soaring military expenditure as a symbol of misplaced priorities, calling on world leaders to rethink their choices. Looking ahead, he urged decisive action in the year 2026, appealing and also calling on citizens around the world to play their part.
As we enter the new year, the world stands at the crossroads. Chaos and uncertainty surround us, division, violence, climate breakdown, and systemic violations of international law. A retreat from the very principles that bind us together as a human family. People everywhere are asking, are leaders even listening? Are they ready to act? As we turn the page on a turbulent year, one fact speaks louder than words. Global military spending has soared to $2.7 trillion, growing by almost 10%. That is 13 times more than all development aid, equivalent to the entire gross domestic product of Africa. All while conflict rages at levels unseen since World War II. On this new year, let's resolve to get our priorities straight. A safer world begins by investing more in fighting poverty and less in fighting wars. Peace must prevail. It is clear the world has the resources to lift lives, heal the planet, and secure a future of peace and justice. In 2026, I call on leaders everywhere: get serious, choose people and planet over pain, and I urge everyone who hears this message, play your part. Our future depends on our collective courage to act. This new year, let's rise together. 'for justice, for humanity, for peace'.
As the year closes, the world is facing a series of challenges.
And as we end the program today, here's our fun fact about the continent. Did you know that while much of the world ends the year in the month of December, Ethiopia celebrates its new year in Cote in September, meaning they're technically years behind the Gregorian calendar. The country uses its own Ge'ez calendar, which is about 7 to 8 years behind the Gregorian calendar due to different calculations for the birth of Jesus, celebrating the new year in Cote in September. And that's it on the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Olarinde.
Our website, channelstv.com, has more information on our top stories.